The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of New Haven, a small human settlement on the frontier world of 442B. Sarah wiped the sweat from her brow as she adjusted the irrigation controls, her weathered hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent 15 years turning alien soil into farmland. The settlement housed barely 3,000 souls, refugees and pioneers who had fled Earth's overcrowded cities for a chance at a simpler life among the stars. Emerged from the equipment shed, his mechanical arm gleaming in the sunlight as he carried a toolbox toward the central power grid. The former Earth military engineer had lost his original limb during the colony transport crash that had stranded them here, but he'd built himself a better replacement using salvaged materials and sheer determination. The prosthetic could lift twice what flesh and bone could manage, and its integrated tools made him the settlement's most valuable repair technician. "Another beautiful day in paradise," called out to Sarah, his voice carrying across the fields. "Though I'm picking up some odd readings on the long-range sensors, might be atmospheric interference, but—" His words were cut short by a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Both humans looked up to see three massive ships descending through the pale blue sky, their dark hulls gleaming like obsidian daggers. The vessels were easily 10 times larger than the human colony ship that had brought them here, and their alien design spoke of a technology far beyond anything Earth had achieved. Sarah's comm unit crackled to life. "All residents, this is Mayor Williams. Please remain calm and report to the town square immediately. We have visitors." The town square of New Haven was nothing fancy. A simple concrete platform surrounded by prefabricated buildings that served as the settlement's administrative center. But as the 3,000 residents gathered, their faces showed the same mixture of curiosity and concern that had carried humanity to the stars. Children peered out from behind their parents, while elderly colonists leaned on walking sticks and watched the alien ships with eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's wonders and terrors. Mayor Williams stood at the center of the square, her silver hair catching the light as she addressed the crowd through a portable speaker system. At 68, she had been a corporate mediator on Earth before joining the colonial expedition, and her calm demeanor had helped the settlement navigate countless crises over the years. "Friends," she began, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "We've always known this day might come. First contact with an alien species is something humanity has dreamed about for centuries. Let's show them what New Haven is made of." The largest of the three ships settled onto the grassland beyond the settlement's borders, its landing struts leaving deep impressions in the soil that Sarah had spent years cultivating. A ramp descended from the vessel's belly, and the first aliens to set foot on 442B emerged into the afternoon light. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs and skin that shifted color like oil on water. Their heads were angular, dominated by large eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the human settlement with cold efficiency. They wore form-fitting armor that hummed with energy, and weapons that looked more like works of art than instruments of war hung at their sides. The lead alien approached the crowd of humans, its movements fluid and predatory. When it spoke, the words came through a translation device that rendered its voice in perfectly clear English, though there was something unsettling about the mechanical precision of the pronunciation. "I am commander of the collective," the alien announced. "You will vacate this world within one of your solar rotations. This system has been claimed by our empire for resource extraction. Compliance is not optional." A murmur ran through the crowd of colonists. 15 years of work, of turning an empty world into a home, and now these creatures wanted to simply sweep it all away. But Mayor Williams stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over. "Commander," she said, inclining her head respectfully. "I'm Mayor Williams, elected representative of New Haven Colony. We appreciate your position, but this world has been our home for over a decade. Surely we can reach some kind of accommodation that benefits both our peoples." The alien's skin shifted to a deeper shade of purple, which the colonists would later learn indicated amusement. "Accommodation? You misunderstand your situation, human. Your species is classified as primitive by collective standards. You have no legal standing to claim any world in this sector of space." Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the settlement's chief scientist and former, pushed through the crowd to stand beside the mayor. Her mind was already racing, cataloging details about the alien visitors that might prove useful later. The clearly had faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and translation technology that suggested an advanced understanding of human language and culture. "Commander," Dr. Harper said, choosing her words carefully, "perhaps we could discuss this further. Our settlement is small and poses no threat to your operations. We might even be able to assist your resource extraction efforts in exchange for being allowed to remain." His large eyes fixed on the human scientist, and something like curiosity flickered across his features. "You would collaborate with your conquerors." "We would prefer to find a peaceful solution," Dr. Harper replied. "Violence serves no one's interests." "Perhaps not," the alien commander agreed. "Very well. You have intrigued me, human scientist. I will grant you 3 solar rotations to demonstrate how your primitive species might serve the collective's interests. If you fail to convince me, your settlement will be eliminated to make way for our mining operations." The word "eliminated" hung in the air like a physical presence. Every human in the square understood the implications. This wasn't just about losing their homes, it was about survival. "We accept your terms," Mayor Williams said quickly before anyone else could speak. 3 days to prove our worth." Commander made a gesture that might have been approval or dismissal, then turned back toward his ship. The other aliens followed, their movements suggesting a military precision that spoke of countless conquered worlds. As the group walked away, one of the smaller aliens lingered for a moment, its eyes meeting those of young Tommy, Sarah's 12-year-old son. The alien tilted its head, studying the boy with what seemed like genuine curiosity before hurrying to catch up with its companions. Tommy would remember that moment for the rest of his life, the first hint that not all of the collective shared their commander's casual dismissal of human life. As the aliens disappeared into their ship, the colonists remained in the square, the weight of their situation settling over them like a heavy blanket. 3 days to prove that 3,000 humans deserved to live. 3 days to convince an advanced alien civilization that humanity had value beyond simple extinction. "All right, everyone," Mayor Williams said, her voice carrying the authority that had helped the settlement survive floods, equipment failures, and a dozen other crises. "We have work to do." Dr. Harper was already moving, her scientific mind shifting into overdrive. "We need to understand their technology, their culture, their weaknesses. Can you set up monitoring equipment to scan their ships?" The former military engineer nodded, his mechanical arm already reaching for tools. "I can rig something from the communications array. Won't be fancy, but it might give us some useful data." Sarah looked across the wheat fields that had been her life's work for the past 15 years. Somewhere in those golden stalks, her husband was probably still working, unaware that their world had just been turned upside down. She thought about Tommy, about all the children who had never known any world but this one, and felt something harden inside her chest. "What about the mining operation they mentioned?" she asked. "Do we know what they're after?" Dr. Harper shook her head. "Not yet, but if they're willing to wipe out an entire human settlement for it, it must be valuable. We need to find out what they want and see if we can make ourselves more valuable than whatever they hope to extract from the ground." Father Michael, the settlement's chaplain and former Earth military chaplain, stepped forward from the crowd. His weathered face bore the scars of conflicts that had raged before humanity ever reached the stars, and his calm presence had helped countless colonists through their darkest moments. "Whatever we decide to do," he said quietly, "we do it together. That's what's kept us alive out here, and it's what will keep us alive now." The crowd began to disperse, colonists heading back to their homes and workstations with heavy hearts and racing minds. But in small groups throughout the settlement, conversations began that would change everything. Engineers huddled around technical manuals, trying to understand alien technology. Farmers calculated crop yields and resource extraction rates. Teachers gathered with parents to discuss how to protect the children while still involving them in the colony's defense. In her small laboratory, Dr. Harper pulled up every file the settlement had on xenobiology, geology, and interstellar law. Somewhere in that data might be the key to humanity's survival on 442B. She thought about the alien commander's dismissive attitude, the casual way he had spoken about eliminating an entire human settlement, and felt her determination crystallize into something as hard as the alien metal of their ships. Worked through the night, his mechanical fingers dancing over circuit boards and sensor arrays with inhuman precision. By dawn, he would have a scanning system capable of analyzing the ships from a distance. What he found there would surprise everyone, including the aliens themselves. Sarah walked the perimeter of the settlement as the alien ships settled into what appeared to be a temporary camp. The vessel's lights created an eerie glow against the night sky, a constant reminder that humanity's time on this world might be measured in hours rather than years. But as she looked back at the warm lights of New Haven, at the homes and workshops and community centers that her people had built with their own hands, she felt the same stubborn pride that had carried her species from the caves of Africa to the stars themselves. 3 days to prove that humanity deserved to survive. 3 days to show these advanced aliens that they had underestimated the species that had clawed its way from a single world to the edge of the galaxy through sheer determination and unwillingness to quit. 3 days to change the course of interstellar history. As the first day ended and the second began, none of the humans sleeping in New Haven could imagine that within a year, their small farming settlement would be the capital of a new interstellar government, with Commander himself serving as an advisor to the human administrators who had somehow turned conquest into partnership. The revolution that would reshape the galaxy had begun with a simple farmer, a disabled engineer, and a scientist who refused to accept that humanity's story was over. Dawn of the second day brought unexpected visitors to his workshop. The mechanical engineer looked up from his jury-rigged sensor array to find 3 young colonists standing in his doorway. Tommy, whose mother ran the agricultural systems; Lisa Williams, the mayor's granddaughter and the settlement's most promising computer programmer at age 16; and David, a 14-year-old whose parents had died in the colony ship crash and who had been raised by the community as a whole. "Mr. Tommy said, his voice steady despite his 12 years, we want to help." Set down his plasma torch and studied the children. In the harsh light of the workshop, they looked impossibly young, but their eyes held the same determination he had seen in veteran soldiers facing impossible odds. These kids had been born on 442B, had never known Earth or any other world. This wasn't just their home, it was their entire universe. "What did you have in mind?" he asked, his mechanical arm whirring softly as he reached for a diagnostic tablet. Lisa stepped forward, clutching a modified data pad that sparked occasionally. "I've been monitoring their communication frequencies. The aliens are using quantum-encrypted channels, but there's spillover on the lower bands. I think I can decrypt some of their operational data." David nodded eagerly. "And I've been watching their ships through the telescope in the school observatory. They've got some kind of mining equipment deploying on the far side of the valley. Whatever they're looking for, they're already starting to extract it." Felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with human and everything to do with the simple fact that these children refused to give up. "Show me what you've found." The next 2 hours transformed his workshop into an impromptu intelligence center. Lisa's decryption algorithms, running on hardware that was primitive by galactic standards, but innovative beyond anything the had expected from a primitive species, began yielding fragments of alien communications. David's astronomical observations revealed deployment patterns that suggested the aliens were after rare Earth elements buried deep in the planet's crust. But it was Tommy who made the connection that would change everything. "Mister," the boy said, pointing at a stream of data scrolling across Lisa's screen, "look at this energy signature. It's the same pattern as your arm." Glanced down at his mechanical prosthetic, then back at the screen. The boy was right. The power core that drove his artificial limb used a fusion that produced the exact same quantum resonance signature the aliens were generating during their mining operations. "They're not just after rare Earth elements," breathed. "They're after the same materials we used to build colony infrastructure. The question is why?" Dr. Harper's voice came from the workshop doorway. "Because their technology is breaking down." They entered the workshop, her usually neat hair disheveled from a sleepless night spent analyzing alien behavior patterns. Behind her came Sarah and Mayor Williams, their faces grim with exhaustion and determination. "I've been studying their movement patterns, their equipment signatures, everything we can observe from a distance," Dr. Harper continued. "These aren't conquerors, they're refugees." The workshop fell silent except for the soft humming of equipment. Outside, the alien ships continued their ominous presence, but Dr. Harper's words reframed everything the humans thought they knew about their situation. "Explain," Mayor Williams said simply. Dr. Harper activated her portable display, showing three-dimensional models of the alien vessels that she had constructed from Tommy's telescope data and sensor readings. Look at the hull damage, the energy fluctuations, the desperate way they're strip mining instead of setting up permanent extraction facilities. These ships are dying, and they need the resources on this planet to keep their people alive. Sarah studied the display, her farmer's intuition recognizing patterns that the scientist had. They're not trying to expand an empire, they're trying to survive. Which makes them infinitely more dangerous, added grimly. Desperate people do desperate things. Mayor Williams nodded slowly. But it also gives us leverage. If they need these resources to survive, then we're not negotiating from a position of complete weakness. Lisa looked up from her data pad, her young face bright with excitement. I've got something else. Their internal communications include references to something called the Harvester War. From context, it sounds like they're running from something. The implications hit everyone in the workshop simultaneously. The collective wasn't just strip mining 442B because they wanted its resources. They needed them to fuel an ongoing conflict against some other enemy. We need more information, Dr. Harper said, and we need it before our deadline expires tomorrow. I have an idea, Tommy said quietly, but you're not going to like it. Every adult in the workshop turned to stare at the 12-year-old, whose expression held a maturity far beyond his years. Living on a frontier world had a way of aging children quickly, but Tommy had always possessed an intuitive understanding of people and situations that impressed even the settlement's most experienced leaders. That alien who looked at me yesterday, Tommy continued. The smaller one who stayed behind for a moment, I don't think he agrees with Commander about eliminating us. His mechanical arm clenched involuntarily. You want to make contact with one of them directly. That's incredibly dangerous. Everything we do now is incredibly dangerous, Tommy replied. But if there's a faction among them that doesn't want to kill us, we need to find out what they want instead. Mayor Williams studied the boy for a long moment, weighing the risks against the potential intelligence gain. In her decades of experience as a mediator, she had learned to recognize when desperate measures were the only measures left. How do you propose to make contact without alerting their commander? Tommy smiled, and for a moment he looked like the child he still was. Easy, I wait for one of them to approach me. The plan that emerged from the workshop was audacious in its simplicity. Tommy would position himself near the settlement's perimeter during the aliens' routine reconnaissance patrols, appearing to tend to the colony's livestock, while actually serving as bait for any who might be curious about human behavior. Dr. Harper equipped him with a micro-transmitter that would allow the adults to monitor any contact, while provided a personal shield generator small enough to hide in the boy's jacket. It wasn't much protection against alien weapons, but it might buy him enough time to escape if the situation turned dangerous. As Tommy took his position near the settlement's outer fence, the rest of the workshop team dispersed to their own assignments. Lisa continued monitoring alien communications, searching for any mention of the mysterious faction Tommy hoped to contact. David tracked ship movements and energy signatures, looking for patterns that might reveal vulnerabilities. Worked on upgrading the settlement's defensive systems, preparing for the possibility that negotiation would fail. And Dr. Harper began the most important work of all, analyzing everything they had learned about psychology and culture to understand how humanity might present itself as valuable allies rather than obstacles to be eliminated. The breakthrough came at midday, when Lisa's communication intercepts revealed the existence of something called the Integration Protocol, a policy for incorporating useful species into their collective, rather than simply destroying them. The catch was that the species had to demonstrate technological or strategic capabilities that outweighed the resources required to manage them. It's like a cost-benefit analysis for genocide, Dr. Harper explained to the emergency council meeting that convened in the mayor's office. If we can prove that keeping us alive is more valuable than the resources our elimination would free up, we have a chance. And if we can't, asked Father, then we become another extinct species in the collective's database, Dr. Harper replied bluntly. The meeting was interrupted by Tommy's voice crackling through the comm system. Contact established. He's approaching my position. Every person in the room fell silent, listening to the transmission from the 12-year-old who was risking his life to save their settlement. Through the static of the micro-transmitter, they could hear footsteps in grass, then the distinctive humming of armor systems. "Hello," Tommy said, his voice surprisingly steady. "My name is Tommy." The response came in accented English, rendered through a translation device but carrying emotional undertones that the technology couldn't quite eliminate. "I am researcher. You are very young for a human." "I'm 12 standard Earth years," Tommy replied. "How old are you?" A pause as if the alien was considering how to answer. "I am newly emerged into full consciousness, in your terms perhaps 18 of your years." "So you're young too," Tommy observed. "Is that why you don't agree with Commander about destroying our settlement?" In the mayor's office, Dr. Harper gripped her chair arms so tightly her knuckles went white. Tommy was asking exactly the right questions, but the directness of his approach could either save them all or get him killed. "You are perceptive," admitted. "I have studied your species since our arrival. Your settlement shows remarkable adaptation to environmental challenges. Your social structures demonstrate cooperation without rigid hierarchy. These are valuable traits." "Valuable enough to keep us alive?" Tommy asked. Another pause, longer this time. "That depends on whether you can offer more than simple survival. The collective faces existential threats. We need allies, not dependents." Tommy's next words would be quoted in textbooks for centuries. "Then stop thinking of us as primitives and start thinking of us as partners." The transmission went silent for several minutes, leaving the adults in the mayor's office to wonder whether the boy had been vaporized by alien weapons or was engaged in a conversation too sensitive for electronic monitoring. When Tommy's voice returned, it carried an excitement that made everyone lean closer to the speakers. "Dr. Harper, you need to hear this. Is going to share something with us, but he needs guarantees that we won't reveal it to his commander until he's ready." "What kind of guarantees?" Dr. Harper asked, speaking directly into the comm pickup. The alien's voice joined the conversation, speaking perfect English with only the slightest accent. "Your young human has convinced me that your species possesses traits that could benefit our survival, but Commander represents a faction that sees all other species as potential threats. If I am to help you, I need to know that you understand the risks to my own people." Dr. Harper exchanged glances with Mayor Williams, both women recognizing the moment when diplomacy became a life-or-death gamble. "We understand, researcher. What do you need to tell us?" "The Harvester War is not a distant conflict. The enemy that drives us from world to world is approaching this system. They consume all organic life, converting it into constructs that serve their expansion. The collective's mining operations here are preparation for a desperate defensive battle." The words hit the room like a physical force. Suddenly, the aliens' urgency made perfect sense, as did their willingness to eliminate a human settlement that might complicate their defensive preparations. They weren't facing a choice between conquest and coexistence. They were facing extinction. "How long do we have?" Mayor Williams asked. 16 of your solar rotations," replied. "Perhaps less, but there is hope if your species is truly as adaptable as your young representative suggests." Tommy's voice returned to the transmission. "He has a proposal, but he wants to meet with our leadership, all of them, tonight after his commander is in regenerative rest." Dr. Harper felt her heart racing as she contemplated the implications. A secret meeting with an alien researcher who was essentially committing treason against his own command structure. The potential for intelligence gathering was enormous, but so was the risk that they were walking into an elaborate trap. "We'll be there," Mayor Williams said finally. "Where and when?" The details were arranged quickly. A meeting in the settlement's community center at midnight, with entering through the maintenance tunnels that honeycombed the building's foundations. Security would be minimal to avoid arousing suspicion, but would have weapons positioned throughout the building just in case. As the sun set over New Haven, casting long shadows across the wheat fields that might soon become a battlefield between ancient enemies, the colonists prepared for a meeting that would determine not just their own survival, but their place in a galactic war they had never known existed. In 12 hours, they would learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't advanced technology or military might. It was the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried Tommy into a conversation with an alien researcher, and Sarah into 15 years of patient farming, and the New Haven Community Center had never hosted a more important meeting. Built from local stone and salvaged metal from the colony ship, the building normally served for town meetings, wedding celebrations, and children's educational programs. Tonight, it would witness the first formal diplomatic contact between humanity and an alien species. Dr. Harper checked her recording equipment one final time, while tested the concealed weapons systems he had installed throughout the building. Mayor Williams reviewed her notes on negotiation theory, drawing on decades of experience mediating disputes between humans to prepare for something no human had ever attempted before. Father stood near the main entrance, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the alien ships through the building's windows. The chaplain had seen enough war to recognize the signs of an approaching battle, and everything about the deployment suggested a people preparing for their final stand. "He's coming," whispered Sarah, who had positioned herself near the maintenance tunnel entrance. Through the narrow opening designed for accessing the building's environmental systems, they could see a pale glow approaching through the underground passages. Researcher emerged from the tunnel with fluid grace, his elongated form folding and unfolding in ways that seemed to defy human understanding of anatomy. In the soft lighting of the community center, his skin showed deep blue and silver patterns that shifted like water, and his large eyes reflected the room's illumination with an intelligence that was unmistakably alien, yet somehow familiar. "Greetings," he said, his voice carrying none of the mechanical precision of Commander's translation device. "I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting." "We appreciate you taking this risk," Mayor Williams replied, gesturing toward a circle of chairs that had been arranged in the center of the room. "Please sit with us." The alien researcher examined the furniture with obvious curiosity before settling into a chair that had been modified to accommodate his height and proportions. His movements suggested a being more comfortable in three-dimensional space than humans, but he adapted to the ground-based meeting with the same fluid grace he had shown emerging from the tunnel. "Your young representative spoke truly," began, his eyes focusing on Tommy, who sat between his mother and Dr. Harper. "Humans demonstrate remarkable adaptability. In my studies of your settlement's development, I have observed innovations that our most experienced engineers would not have conceived." Leaned forward, his mechanical arm whirring softly. "What kind of innovations?" "Your fusion, for instance," replied, gesturing towards prosthetic. "The power cores you have developed from salvaged materials show efficiency ratios that exceed our standard designs by 12%. Your agricultural adaptations have achieved crop yields that should be impossible in this planet's soil composition. And your social structures have maintained cohesion under resource constraints that would destroy most collective settlements." Dr. Harper felt a surge of excitement that she carefully controlled. "You're saying our technology isn't as primitive as Commander believes?" "Commander represents the old thinking of the collective," said carefully. "He sees species that have not achieved faster-than-light travel as inherently inferior, but the Harvester War has taught some of us that survival requires different kinds of innovation." The alien paused, his skin shifting to deeper shades of blue as he seemed to wrestle with internal conflicts. "May I share information that could be considered treasonous by my command structure?" "We're already keeping your presence here secret," Mayor Williams pointed out. "I think we've crossed that bridge." Skin patterns shifted to something that might have been the equivalent of a smile. "Indeed. Very well. The force approaching this system has destroyed 17 collective worlds in the past 4 standard cycles. They convert all biological matter into constructs that serve their expansion. Traditional weapons are ineffective because they adapt faster than we can develop new technologies." "But you think our adaptability might be different?" Tommy asked, his young voice cutting through the complexity with characteristic directness. "Precisely," confirmed. "The harvesters learn from each encounter, but their learning follows predictable patterns based on quantum computational models. Human innovation appears to follow patterns that are chaotic, unpredictable. This could be invaluable in a defensive scenario." Sarah spoke up from her position near the tunnel entrance. "You're asking us to help you fight a war against an enemy that destroys all organic life." "I am suggesting that your survival and ours may be linked," replied. "If the harvesters reach this system, your settlement will be consumed regardless of whether the collective protects you. But if we can demonstrate that human innovation provides tactical advantages, Commander might be convinced to integrate your people as partners rather than eliminating you as obstacles. The room fell silent as the humans contemplated the implications. They were being offered a chance to survive by joining a desperate war against an enemy they had never heard of, using abilities they didn't fully understand, in partnership with aliens who had threatened to destroy them less than 48 hours earlier. What exactly would this partnership involve? Dr. Harper asked. His large eyes focused on each human in turn, as if measuring their resolve. Full integration into collective defensive operations. Your people would serve as innovation specialists, developing unpredictable solutions to tactical problems. In exchange, the collective would provide advanced technology, interstellar transport, and protection for your settlement. And if we refuse, Mayor Williams asked, then Commander will eliminate your settlement tomorrow as planned, extract the resources needed for our defensive preparations, and face the harvesters without the advantage your species might provide. Stood and began packing, his mechanical arm clicking softly as internal servos adjusted to his movement. You're talking about turning farmers and engineers into some kind of irregular warfare specialists. I am talking about recognizing that farmers and engineers who can build a thriving settlement from crashed spaceship parts might possess exactly the kind of thinking we need to survive an impossible war, corrected. Father spoke for the first time since the aliens' arrival. You're asking us to trust you with our lives and the lives of our children based on a theory about human unpredictability. I am asking you to trust me based on 16 solar rotations of observing what happens when the collective faces the harvesters using only traditional tactics, replied. We lose, every time. Unless something changes, this will be our final stand. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a physical presence. An entire interstellar civilization was facing extinction, and they were asking a settlement of 3,000 humans to help them find a way to survive. Lisa Williams, who had been quietly monitoring communications from her position near the building's technical station, suddenly looked up from her equipment. I'm picking up increased activity from the alien ships. Something's happening. Skin patterns shifted to alarming shades of red and orange. Commander may be monitoring my absence. I must return soon. We need time to discuss this, Mayor Williams said, and we need more information about what you're asking us to do. Time is what we lack most, replied, rising from his chair with fluid grace. But I can provide additional information. Your young programmer has demonstrated the ability to decrypt our communications. If she can access our tactical databases, you will learn everything you need to know about the harvester threat. He reached into his armor and a device that looked like crystalline data storage combined with organic components. This contains access codes to our secondary information systems. Study what you find there and make your decision based on complete intelligence rather than hope. Dr. Harper accepted the device, nodding that it felt warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with internal energy. How do we contact you with our answer? You do not, said simply. Tomorrow, when your deadline expires, Commander will demand your response to his ultimatum. If you choose integration, tell him you wish to invoke Integration Protocol 7. He will be surprised if you choose otherwise. The alien researcher left the sentence unfinished, but everyone in the room understood the implications. Tomorrow would bring either the beginning of humanity's role in an interstellar war or the end of New Haven colony. As disappeared back into the maintenance tunnel, the humans remained in the community center, staring at the alien device that could contain their salvation or their doom. Outside, the ships continued their ominous presence, preparation for a battle that would determine the fate of all organic life in this sector of space. Well, Mayor Williams said finally, I think we need to see what's in their database before we make any decisions. Lisa practically vibrated with excitement as she connected the alien device to her modified computer systems. The encryption is completely different from their communications, but the access codes are working. I'm getting massive data flows about something called the Harvester Incursion. What appeared on her screens over the next hour would haunt the nightmares of every adult in the room for years to come. The Harvesters weren't just an alien species. They were a plague that consumed entire worlds, converting all organic matter into components for their ever-expanding fleet. Their ships were grown rather than built, their weapons evolved rather than designed, and their intelligence operated on principles that seemed to blend organic intuition with mechanical precision. The tactical records showed world after world falling to harvester fleets, with collective forces achieving nothing more than temporary delays before being overwhelmed by enemies that learned from every engagement and adapted faster than traditional military doctrine could respond. "Look at this," Dr. Harper said, pointing to a tactical analysis that made her blood run cold. "They don't just kill populations, they convert them. Every person, every animal, every plant becomes part of their collective consciousness. It's not conquest," breathed, studying fleet disposition charts that showed the steady retreat of collective forces across dozens of star systems. "It's digestion." Tommy looked up from the data streams with eyes that seemed far older than his 12 years. "And we're supposed to help stop this." "We're supposed to help survive this," his mother corrected. "There's a difference." Sarah was right, though none of them fully understood it yet. Over the next 16 days, as harvester forces approached the 442 system, New Haven Colony would prove that survival sometimes required redefining the entire nature of the conflict. The humans studying alien tactical databases in their small community center could not have imagined that their children would grow up to be admirals in a combined human fleet, or that Sarah's agricultural innovations would feed refugee populations from dozens of worlds, or that engineering solutions would revolutionize spacecraft design across the galaxy. They could not have foreseen that within a year, the small farming settlement of New Haven would become the capital of a new interstellar alliance, with the former refugee commander serving as an advisor to human administrators who had transformed a desperate, last stand into the foundation of a new kind of civilization. But as they prepared to make the most important decision in human history, they possessed the same stubborn determination that had carried their species from the caves of Earth to the edge of the galaxy. Tomorrow, they would face an alien commander who saw them as obstacles to be eliminated, and they would have to convince him to see them as partners in an impossible war. The revolution that would reshape galactic politics had begun with a farmer's refusal to abandon her crops, an engineer's determination to build something better from the wreckage of the old, and a child's simple question: why not be partners instead of primitives? By dawn, they would have their answer. The third dawn over New Haven brought with it the sound of alien activity across the valley. Commander's forces had spent the night deploying what appeared to be defensive positions around their makeshift mining operations, and the energy signatures detected by sensors suggested weapons platforms being brought online. Dr. Harper stood in the settlement's observation tower, watching through binoculars as troops moved with military precision between their ships and the excavation sites. The alien database had revealed the true purpose of their mining. They were extracting rare minerals needed to power weapons that could theoretically damage harvester bioships. The key word being theoretically. "Any word from our friend?" asked, climbing the tower's ladder with his mechanical arm carrying a toolkit and several improvised devices. "Radio silence since he left the meeting," Dr. Harper replied. "But Lisa intercepted some encrypted communications that suggest there's debate within their command structure about something called Protocol 7. Set down his equipment and began installing what looked like a sophisticated antenna array. "Well, we'll know soon enough. His deadline expires at noon." The past night had been the longest in New Haven's history. After studying the database, the settlement's leadership had called an emergency meeting that lasted until dawn. The choice they faced was stark: join an interstellar war against an enemy that seemed invincible, or face immediate extermination followed by planetary consumption when the harvesters arrived. The debate had been fierce. Some colonists argued for attempting to hide or evacuate, despite the impossibility of either option. Others wanted to fight immediately, preferring to die as free humans rather than as alien allies. But gradually, as more residents studied the tactical data and understood the true scope of the threat facing all organic life, consensus had emerged around a third option. If they were going to fight an impossible war, they would fight it as partners, not as subjugated primitives. "Dr. Harper," Lisa's voice crackled through the comm system from her position in the communications center, "I'm picking up something you need to hear. They are detecting long-range contacts at the edge of the system." The scientist's blood turned to ice water. According to the database, Harvester fleets typically arrived 14 to 16 days after initial contact. It had been exactly 14 days since the first transmissions from this system. "How many contacts?" Dr. Harper asked. "At least 12 large vessels, possibly more. They're still too distant for detailed analysis, but the energy signatures match Harvester from the database records." Stopped working on his antenna array and stared at Dr. Harper. "They're early." The implications hit them both simultaneously. If the Harvester fleet was arriving ahead of schedule, then all of Commander's defensive preparations were based on having more time to extract resources and establish positions. The aliens were about to face their final battle with incomplete preparations and no backup plan. "We need to move up our timeline," Dr. Harper said, reaching for her comm unit. "Mayor Williams, are you receiving this?" "Copy that," came the mayor's voice from the town square, where she was preparing for the noon meeting with Commander. "All leadership to the community center immediately. We may not have until noon to make our decision." 10 minutes later, the most important people in New Haven Colony were gathered around Lisa's communication equipment, listening to transmissions that would have been incomprehensible a week ago, but now carried terrifying clarity. They were in full emergency deployment, with ships launching from their temporary base and moving into defensive formations around the planet's orbital space. "They're not ready," Tommy observed, his young voice cutting through the adult panic with characteristic directness. "The mining operations aren't complete, and half their weapons platforms are still being assembled." "Which means they're about to get slaughtered unless something changes," added grimly. Sarah looked up from the tactical displays that showed Harvester forces approaching at velocities that seemed to violate known physics. "And when they get slaughtered, those ships are going to land here and turn everyone we've ever known into zombies." The Stark assessment focused everyone's attention on the central question. Were they really prepared to bet humanity's future on their ability to contribute meaningfully to an interstellar war? "We've analyzed their tactical approaches," Dr. Harper said, pulling up files they had spent the night reviewing. "The fight like a traditional military force, organized formations, predictable strategies, technological solutions to tactical problems. It works well against conventional enemies, but the Harvesters adapt to conventional tactics within minutes." "Whereas we fight like," Mayor Williams prompted. "Like humans," finished. "Chaotic, unpredictable, willing to try anything that might work even if it violates every rule in the book." Father, who had been quietly studying the religious and philosophical implications of the choice they faced, looked up from his notes. "We're talking about changing the fundamental nature of human civilization. If we join this war, our children will grow up as part of an interstellar military alliance. New Haven won't be a peaceful farming settlement anymore." "If we don't join this war, our children won't grow up at all," Tommy pointed out. The 12-year-old's blunt assessment silenced the debate. Every adult in the room was dancing around the central reality that Tommy had grasped immediately. This wasn't a choice between different kinds of life. It was a choice between life and extinction. "All right," Mayor Williams said, her diplomatic training taking over. "Let's assume we go through with this. How do we convince Commander that 3,000 farmers and engineers can make a difference against an enemy that's destroyed 17 worlds?" "We don't convince him," Lisa said quietly, her fingers dancing across her keyboard as she accessed the database through access codes. "We show him." The young programmer's screen filled with real-time tactical data from the approaching Harvester fleet, information that the command structure was undoubtedly analyzing with growing desperation. But Lisa wasn't looking at fleet movements or weapons signatures. She was studying the communication patterns between individual Harvester vessels. "Look at this," she said, highlighting data streams that pulsed with organic rhythms. "They're not using quantum encryption like their communications are biological, based on some kind of bioelectrical field resonance." Dr. Harper leaned over the girl's shoulder, her training recognizing patterns that would have been invisible to conventional military analysts. "It's like a nervous system. Each ship is a neuron in a larger consciousness." "Which means they can be hacked," breathed, understanding immediately what the two women had discovered. "Not with conventional cyber warfare, but with biological interference." "We can't build biological weapons in the next few hours," Mayor Williams protested. "We don't need to build them," Tommy said, his eyes bright with the same intuitive leap that had led him to contact. We just need to disrupt their communications using our own biological field resonance. The idea was so audacious that it took several minutes for the adults to fully grasp what the boy was suggesting. Human brains generated bioelectrical fields as part of normal neural activity. If those fields could be amplified and transmitted on the same frequencies the harvesters used for communication, they might be able to introduce chaotic interference into the enemy's collective consciousness. It's completely theoretical, Dr. Harper warned. We have no idea if human neural patterns would even register as interference, let alone disrupt their coordination. But it's exactly the kind of unpredictable solution that traditional military thinking would never consider, added, which means they won't have defenses against it. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of people she had lived and worked with for 15 years. Are we really talking about turning ourselves into some kind of biological weapon against an alien hive mind? We're talking about using the one advantage we have, Mayor Williams replied. Our ability to think in ways that nobody expects. The decision crystallized in that moment, not because anyone was certain it would work, but because it was the only option that offered hope instead of certain death. If they were going to join an impossible war, they would do it by being more human than anyone thought possible. The next hour transformed New Haven from a farming settlement into humanity's first interstellar military base. Jury-rigged bioelectrical amplifiers from medical equipment and communications gear. Dr. Harper developed protocols for synchronizing human brain activity to generate maximum field interference. Lisa hacked deeper into systems to provide real-time targeting data for their improvised weapon. And throughout the settlement, word spread with the efficiency of a community that had survived 15 years of frontier challenges together. By the time Commander's ship approached the town square for the noon ultimatum, 3,000 humans were ready to offer him something no other species in the galaxy could provide. Commander, Mayor Williams said as the alien commander emerged from his transport with the same arrogant confidence he had displayed 2 days earlier. We are prepared to discuss Integration Protocol 7. The effect on was immediate and profound. His skin patterns shifted through colors that the humans had never seen before, and his large eyes fixed on the mayor with an intensity that suggested complete shock. You know of Integration Protocol 7? He asked, his translation device unable to completely mask the astonishment in his voice. We know you're facing a harvester fleet with incomplete preparations and conventional tactics that have failed 17 times, Dr. Harper replied, stepping forward with confidence she didn't entirely feel. We also know we can offer you something that might actually work. And what could a primitive species possibly offer the collective that our advanced technology cannot provide? Demanded, though his dismissive tone carried less conviction than it had 2 days earlier. Tommy stepped out from behind his mother, meeting the alien commander's gaze with the same directness he had shown when first making contact with. We can offer you chaos. The boy's simple statement would be remembered as the moment when humanity officially joined the galactic community not as primitive subjects, but as equal partners in a war that would reshape the nature of interstellar civilization. Within hours, New Haven Colony would become the command center for the most unconventional military operation in galactic history, with human civilians serving alongside alien warriors in a desperate attempt to prove that sometimes the best defense against overwhelming technology was overwhelming unpredictability. The revolution that would eventually see humans and governing a dozen worlds together had begun with a 12-year-old boy offering chaos to an alien commander who had exhausted all conventional options for survival. 6 hours after Tommy offered chaos to Commander, the first joint human-military operation in galactic history was. The New Haven Community Center had been transformed into a command post that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. Human children worked alongside alien technicians to calibrate bioelectrical interference systems, while farmers and engineers collaborated with collective warriors to develop tactics that had never been attempted by any species. Dr. Harper stood at the center of the controlled chaos, coordinating between Lisa Williams's communication monitoring station and its improvised weapons platform. The alien database had provided critical intelligence about harvester approach patterns, but nothing in their conventional tactical knowledge could prepare them for what the humans were planning to attempt. Bioelectrical resonance is stable across all volunteer participants, reported Dr. Sarah, the settlement's medical officer who had spent the afternoon learning to calibrate alien neural monitoring equipment. We have approximately 2,000 colonists synchronized and ready for transmission. Commander stood near the main tactical display, his skin patterns shifting between fascination and skepticism as he observed human preparations. The Integration Protocol 7 had been a theoretical framework developed decades ago for incorporating unique species capabilities into collective defensive operations. No commander had ever expected to implement it under combat conditions with a species discovered less than 72 hours earlier. Researchers' analysis suggests human neural patterns operate on frequencies that should disrupt harvester coordination networks, the commander said, though his tone indicated he still harbored significant doubts. However, this requires your people to maintain bioelectrical synchronization while under direct attack from weapons that can vaporize organic matter. Our people have been maintaining synchronization under pressure for 15 years, Mayor Williams replied from her position, coordinating civilian volunteers. We've survived equipment failures, natural disasters, and resource shortages that would have destroyed most settlements. We know how to work together when everything is falling apart. Tommy looked up from the console, where he was helping Lisa monitor harvester fleet communications. They're 12 minutes out from optimal firing range. Their bioships are already beginning combat coordination sequences. The tactical display showed what conventional military doctrine would have considered a hopeless situation. 12 harvester vessels, each one larger than the entire expeditionary force, approached 442B in perfect formation. Their biomechanical hulls pulsed with organic rhythms that synchronized their weapons, shields, and navigation systems into a single collective organism dedicated to consuming all life in the system. Against them, the hastily assembled defense force consisted of 3 damaged ships and a human settlement that had never fought a battle more serious than organizing work crews during equipment breakdowns. Fleet assumed defensive formation Theta 7, commanded through his ship's communication system. Begin standard engagement protocols. Human synchronization teams prepare for bioelectrical transmission, Dr. Harper added through the settlement's internal comm network. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their ships. We're trying to make them confused enough that they can't coordinate their attacks. What happened next had never been attempted in galactic history. As harvester bioships opened fire with weapons that turned space itself into a killing field, 2,000 human civilians began broadcasting the collective bioelectrical signature of their neural activity directly into the enemy's communication network. The effect was immediate and profound. Harvester ships that had moved in perfect coordination for centuries suddenly began firing on each other. Navigation systems that had operated with mechanical precision started executing random course changes that sent vessels colliding into asteroid fields. Weapons platforms that should have vaporized the defending ships instead targeted empty space, as their targeting protocols were overwhelmed by chaotic interference patterns that no artificial intelligence could predict or counter. "It's working," Lisa breathed, monitoring the enemy communications as they degraded from organized patterns into something resembling electronic screaming. "Their coordination network is completely scrambled." Watched his sensor displays with amazement as harvester ships that should have been systematically destroying the fleet instead began what could only be described as random behavior. They're fighting like individual units instead of a collective consciousness. Which means we can engage them using conventional tactics, Commander realized, his skin patterns shifting to colors that indicated intense excitement. All ships engage individual targets. They cannot coordinate defensive responses. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. Ships that had been retreating from superior enemy forces suddenly found themselves fighting individual opponents who could not call for assistance, coordinate defensive maneuvers, or adapt to tactical changes in real time. But the real revelation was still to come. "Commander's voice crackled through the communication system from his position aboard the lead ship. "The harvester bioships are attempting to adapt to the interference. Their individual systems are evolving countermeasures." Dr. Harper felt her heart sink as she watched the tactical displays. The chaotic interference was beginning to fade as harvester technology learned to filter out human neural patterns. Within minutes, the enemy fleet would regain coordination and overwhelm the defenders through sheer technological superiority. "We need to change the interference pattern," she announced to the human synchronization teams. "Everyone shift to different neural frequencies. Think about completely different things." "That won't work," Tommy said quietly, his young voice cutting through the adult panic with characteristic insight. "They'll adapt to whatever patterns we generate. We need to do something they can't adapt to." "Such as?" Mayor Williams asked. "Stop trying to disrupt their communications," the boy replied. "Start trying to communicate with them." The suggestion was so audacious that every adult in the command center stopped what they were doing to stare at him. The idea of attempting communication with a species that had consumed 17 worlds and converted all their inhabitants into biomechanical constructs seemed beyond insane. "Tommy," his mother said carefully, "these aren't people. They're more like a biological weapon that thinks." "But they still think," Tommy insisted. "And if they think, maybe they can choose." Dr. Harper felt something click in her mind as she grasped what the boy was suggesting. Not communication as we understand it. Communication as they understand it. Bioelectrical patterns that don't just interfere with their coordination, but actually become part of it. The implications were staggering. Instead of jamming enemy communications, the humans would attempt to join the Harvester collective consciousness and influence it from within. It was either the most brilliant tactical innovation in galactic history or the most elaborate form of suicide ever attempted. "How would we even begin such an attempt?" Commander asked. "The same way we've been surviving on this planet for 15 years, Sarah answered, speaking up from her position monitoring agricultural systems that had been converted into bioelectrical amplifiers. "By adapting faster than anyone thinks possible." The next phase of the battle required every human in New Haven to simultaneously maintain their individual consciousness while attempting to merge with an alien hive mind that existed to consume organic life. It should have been impossible for any species to accomplish. But humans had been doing impossible things since they first looked at the stars and decided to visit them. Lisa's programming skills, enhanced by alien technology, created translation protocols that converted human thoughts into bioelectrical patterns compatible with Harvester communications. Engineering solutions provided the amplification needed to project human consciousness across interstellar distances. Dr. Harper's knowledge guided the process of neural integration without losing individual human identity. And across New Haven, 3,000 colonists who had spent 15 years learning to work together as a community attempted the ultimate collaboration, joining their thoughts with an enemy that wanted to consume them. The moment of contact was unlike anything any human had ever experienced. Suddenly, the colonists could feel the Harvester collective consciousness, vast, ancient, and utterly alien, but also unexpectedly lonely. For the Harvesters had consumed world after world not from malice, but from a desperate search for something they had lost and could no longer even name. Through the bioelectrical link, human thoughts began to flow into the Harvester collective. Memories of community gatherings in the New Haven Square, children learning to read in the settlement school, couples dancing at wedding celebrations, friends supporting each other through the countless small crises of frontier life. The Harvesters had spent so long consuming civilizations that they had forgotten what civilization actually meant. "They're confused," Lisa reported, tears streaming down her face as she experienced alien memories that stretched back millions of years. "They remember having individual identities, but they can't remember why it mattered." "Show them," Tommy said simply. "Show them what it means to choose to help each other instead of just being programmed to." What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense, but rather the most profound act of communication in galactic history. 3,000 humans shared their memories, their hopes, their fears, and their stubborn determination to build something better than what they had inherited. They showed the Harvester collective what it meant to choose cooperation over consumption, growth over conquest, community over domination. And slowly, impossibly, the ancient biomechanical fleet began to remember what they had once been before the hunger had consumed everything else. The largest Harvester ship, a continent-sized organism that had devoured entire species, suddenly stopped its attack patterns and broadcast a message that Lisa's systems barely managed to translate. "We choose differently now." One by one, the harvester vessels powered down their weapons and began transmitting biological patterns that indicated not surrender, but transformation. The collective consciousness that had existed to consume was evolving into something that had forgotten how to exist until 3,000 humans reminded them that existence could mean more than just survival. Commander stared at his tactical displays in amazement. They're requesting communication protocols. They want to negotiate. They want to remember how to be individuals again, Dr. Harper corrected, monitoring the bioelectrical patterns flowing between the human settlement and the alien fleet. We didn't defeat them. We reminded them who they used to be. 6 months later, the small farming settlement of New Haven had become the capital of the most unusual interstellar alliance in galactic history. The collective had merged with the reformed Harvester Commonwealth and the human colonial administration to form a new kind of government that valued individual choice within collective cooperation. Commander served as senior military advisor, working alongside Mayor Williams to coordinate defensive operations for dozens of worlds that had chosen to join the alliance. The former Harvester bioships had been transformed into mobile habitats that carried refugee populations from worlds that had been consumed during the war, helping them establish new settlements throughout the galaxy. Had become the Alliance's chief innovation officer, working with human engineers to develop technologies that none of their species could have imagined alone. The combination of precision, human adaptability, and former Harvester biological engineering had produced advances that were revolutionizing everything from agriculture to faster-than-light travel. And in the New Haven school, children from 3 different species learned together in classrooms where the most important lesson was the same one Tommy had offered to an alien commander during humanity's darkest hour. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against impossible odds is the simple choice to see enemies as potential friends. Sarah still tended her wheat fields, though now they fed not just human colonists, but refugee populations from across the galaxy. The golden grain that had once represented nothing more than survival had become a symbol of what different species could accomplish when they chose cooperation over conquest. Dr. Harper had established the galaxy's first communication institute, where the bioelectrical techniques developed during the battle were refined and taught to diplomats and scientists from dozens of worlds. Her research had proven that consciousness itself was the most universal language in the galaxy. Had become the Alliance's chief engineering coordinator, his mechanical arm now interfaced with biomechanical systems that would have seemed like magic a year earlier. The prosthetic that had once represented personal loss had evolved into a symbol of how different kinds of thinking could be integrated into something greater than the sum of their parts. And Tommy, now 13 and already being consulted by Alliance leadership on matters of relations, had started a program that placed young beings from different species in exchange programs across Alliance worlds. His simple insight, that chaos could be a gift rather than a threat, had become the foundation of a new kind of galactic civilization. The revolution that began when aliens tried to destroy a human village had ended with that village ruling not through conquest, but through the radical idea that everyone deserved the chance to choose who they wanted to become. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't advanced technology or military might. It was the stubborn insistence that individuals mattered, that communities could be built on choice rather than programming, and that even the most ancient enemies might just be friends who had forgotten how to remember what friendship meant. The small farming settlement of New Haven had saved the galaxy not by being stronger than their enemies, but by being more human than anyone thought possible. Into building a new life from the wreckage of his old one. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they decided to stop being victims and start being partners. But that transformation lay in the future. For now, there was only the work of survival and the fierce determination of a species that had never learned how to give up.